Hey there everybody, it's markcrilley. I'm back with another video. You know, I've been doing how to draw videos on YouTube since 2007, so I've done hundreds of these videos, but I have never attempted to bring together all my various advice on how to draw or how to get better at drawing. And so I thought that's what I would do today. And just so that you're not bored looking at a blank sheet of paper, I'm going to be working on this illustration here. That's for a project that I cannot yet discuss, but I'm going to go ahead and start putting down a little base layer of gray here. I'm hoping to make this look like a silver mask, or a sort of metallic looking mask. In any case, I have prepared 10 different sort of general pieces of advice for people hoping to get better at drawing, and let's go ahead and get into the first one. If I can just take a break here from the markering. And the first one is this. Number 1, draw regularly every day if you can. Of course, not earth-shattering advice. Everyone will tell you that. If you want to get better at anything, you should be doing it every day. And, you know, some of these things in here are kind of, you know, common sense things. Unfortunately, I don't have miraculous, weird advice that you've never heard before, like eat turnips. If you eat turnips, you will magically get better at drawing. No, a lot of this stuff is maybe things that you've heard art teachers say to you before, but surely drawing every day or as often as possible, little by little, you will improve, or you will become more and more familiar with you know, the way the pencil hits the paper and how you get different effects by holding the pencil at a different angle and so forth. All of this stuff becomes clear to you over time, over a long period of time, and I'll be talking more about that later. But yes, not much more you can say about that than what I've already said. Draw every day if you can, or as often as possible, if indeed you hope to get better than you are right now. Let's move on to number 2, which is maybe a little more interesting. Drawing from life is ideal. Drawing with the assistance of a photo reference is common among professionals. Very few artists can draw anything they want to flawlessly, entirely from memory. So just want to make that clear. I think a lot of people do have this idea that you know, that it's a badge of shame that they have to look at something while they draw. That is certainly not the case. I was thinking the other day, for those of you who saw this old movie called Amadeus, about life of Mozart, there's this scene where Mozart hears a piece of music just one time, doesn't need sheet music, just runs over to the piano and plays it flawlessly. Well, that's kind of what it would be like for someone to say, well, I want to draw a giraffe. I don't need to look at a photo of a giraffe. I will just remember all the times that I've seen giraffes in my life, or photos of them, and I will just draw it entirely from memory. Well, gosh, I wish I could do that. I wish I had a photographic memory and could draw anything from memory just because I want to. Don't be so hard on yourself if you can't do that. The truth is, I would say 99% of artists can't do that. Those who can draw, let's say, the human body flawlessly from memory, I would say the vast majority of those earned that ability by way of hard work and memorization and practice. In the meantime, until you have memorized something, whether it be a giraffe or whatever, don't feel that you have failed somehow by looking at photo reference, or as I said, drawing from life is ideal. That's the way artists have drawn for years. Any one of these I could go on and on about, but I do want to keep this video to a reasonable length. So let's move on to number 3. Do studies, careful copies, of drawings you admire to unlock the secrets of how those drawings were made. Now this really was not delivered to me as advice very strongly until I got to college. And David Small, who I've mentioned before, he was a mentor for me. He advised me to start doing studies, copies of drawings by the great European masters like Degas and Rembrandt and so forth. And sure enough, I found that that was hugely helpful in terms of learning drawing techniques. As you do a careful copy of a drawing by, let's just say, Rembrandt, in order to reproduce that drawing, you are having to figure out well, how quickly did he make that line? That line looks real loose. It looks like he drew it really fast. I'll try it, you know. And little by little, you will begin to unlock his secrets. And then you sit down to do a completely different drawing, and you're no longer looking at the Rembrandt drawing, but that little technique may come back and find its way into your work. So, yeah, I can't say that enough. Doing studies, or, you know, to put it crudely, copies of great drawings is a wonderful way of learning. Of course, you have to be careful that the thing that you are learning from is good artwork. If you're learning from someone who does not have a very professional look to their work, then you are probably going to pick up their bad habits. But in any case, I would say, generally speaking, doing some studies is better than doing none at all. Let me move on now. In fact, I'm going to put down this gray marker and pull out my trusty black Prismacolor to begin refining some of these lines. Number 4. Try looking at the thing you're drawing as an abstract arrangement of shapes composed of lines at various angles. I wonder if art teachers have told some of you this before. This again was something that was made more clear for me in college than it was in high school, but you can be distracted by your sort of mental image of the thing you're trying to draw. Let's say it's a tree, and you start trying to draw your memory of what a tree looks like rather than what that single tree looks like that's right in front of you. And in fact, the tree that's in front of you can be broken down into abstract shapes, and as I said, you know, lines pointing at different angles, and in a way you may find that you do a better job of drawing the tree when you stop thinking about the fact, I'm drawing a tree. Just forget about that and say, no, I'm drawing these shapes that are in front of me. And I found that was a really big turning point for me as an artist when I learned to do that, to look at things in a more abstract way. I think that's actually potentially a subject for a whole separate video. So watch this space. Perhaps I will be doing something about that. How to view things in an abstract way so as to break them down into shapes and just draw the shapes, rather than your preconceived notion of what something is, you know, quote unquote, supposed to look like. Let's move on now to number 5. Pay attention to the level of contrast in your drawings, darks versus lights. And this is actually going to come into play in this particular illustration that I'm working on today. You can see me going in with a black colored pencil to darken in certain areas, and later on, to no one's surprise, I will be pulling out my beloved white gouache, a white opaque paint, and begin going for the lights versus the darks. And I do think in drawing, generally speaking, we want there to be contrast. We want the darks to be really dark. We want the lights to be really, you know, as close to white as possible. That's partly why I use this black Prismacolor. It's a black color pencil. It goes completely black. If I limited myself to a lead pencil, it's only going to get so dark. It'll get to a kind of a dark gray. And that's kind of why I developed this technique. It's not a technique I'm sure that I invented, but for me anyway, I stumbled upon this technique of combining black colored pencil with my lead pencil to get the really dark blacks, and then, as I said, later on you're going to see me going for the white. So this is maybe the one piece of advice that I allowed myself out of these 10 that's not so general. It's more of a specific piece of advice, but I certainly know, you know, looking back at my drawings from elementary school or high school, a lot of them are a little washed out, and the blacks don't really get completely black. And indeed, I wasn't using gouache at that point to try to make the lights even lighter. So anyway, that is something specifically related to drawing, as is all this advice. It's not about painting so much. It's going to be mainly drawing advice. Let's move on to number 6. Get your art supplies at a real art store. experiment until you find the pencils, paper, etc. that suit you. Yeah, I think a lot of people maybe are using inferior art supplies that they got at a drugstore or, you know, like a Walmart or something. I don't want to say that they only sell terrible art supplies at places like that. I don't know that for a fact, but I know that if you go to an actual art store, you're going to get much better quality of material. And these days, your local community might not have a specific art supply store. It may be more like a big arts and crafts store. Here in America, we have a store called Michael's, a chain, you know, of stores called Michael's, and others like that, Hobby Lobby and so forth. But I do know these videos are watched by people all over the world, so I don't want to talk too much about particular brands or whatever. More about the principle of going to a real art supply store is going to give you better quality materials. And I do think that, you know, it's important to have materials that are at least decent. But you'll notice that in my advice I said, you know, experiment until you find the stuff that works for you. Don't get too hung up on, oh, I need to use the same art supply that Mark Crilley is using or whoever. Experiment and find the stuff that works best for you. Like, for example, one problem that a lot of people have is smearing their drawing. They brush their hand across the drawing, the pencil drawing, and it smears all over the place, and it turns into a mess. Well, that might be a result of your pencil lead being too soft. Too soft for you, I should say. You might benefit from a pencil lead that's not so soft, it doesn't smear around so much. But I can't tell you, and no one can tell you except you, what pencil is best. You got to sort of experiment and find the one that suits you. So that's why I'm always a little hesitant to say, hey, everybody, here's what I use, and I think you should run out to the store and get the exact same thing, because it might not work. I've heard from people who get this black Prismacolor, and they say, I hate it, it doesn't work for me. And I'm like, yeah, well, don't use it. Use, you know, experiment. Find the things that work for you. So let's move on now to number 7. Learn the 3 different systems of perspective, 1-point, 2-point, and 3-point. Now, this is another sort of specific thing, maybe value judgment. Some people may say that perspective is not absolutely necessary to becoming a good artist. You know, I'm probably going to subtitle this video 10 things that worked for me, you know, or 10 things that helped me get better as an artist, because I do think that all of this is highly personal. I found that when I figured out perspective drawing, that opened up a lot of doors for me in terms of doing all kinds of drawings, especially for comic books, but not limited to that. Having a sense of the rules of perspective will just really help you render things more accurately, because you just understand which lines are supposed to be roughly parallel to one another in your drawing. So, yeah, I have made a series of videos that explain, 2 different series of videos that explain the basic rules of perspective. I will link to them in this, you know, in the info box, the description of this particular video. Also, my book, Mastering Manga 1, the first one, has quite an extensive section on perspective. But again, you don't need to buy a book. You could get it all from my videos. Let's move on to number 8. Challenge yourself to step out of your comfort zone and draw in different styles. Now, this is maybe particular to me. I like drawing in different styles. I do think that you can stagnate a little if you only draw one particular type of thing. Maybe, you know, if you're fascinated with manga, or you're fascinated with superheroes, and that's kind of the only thing you've been drawing over and over and over again, I think it probably would be helpful for you to challenge yourself every once in a while and do a different style. And then when you come back to your preferred style, the one that you really love, you'll be mixing in new techniques, and different things will come into it. A lot of times when I'm feeling uninspired, I will just challenge myself to do a new type of drawing that I've never done before, and I just find that fun and energizing. So I wanted to include that. as one of my pieces of advice here. You know what I think I'm going to do, because I think people watching even a video like this, they like to see me get a little closer to a finished result. So I'm going to do some time-lapse right now to speed along with this drawing of the mask, even though it's not particularly related to what this video is supposed to be teaching, but I thought it'd be nicer if by the end of it, and when I lay my pencil down, we're a little closer to a finished product. So you're going to see me pull out my white gouache, this opaque paint. I'm going to add a lot of highlights, maybe go back in with the black pencil a little more, and then we'll come back to, what will it be? It'll be number 9, I guess? Yeah, we'll be doing number 9 and 10 to wrap up the video. All right, well, you can see how contrast plays a particularly important role in this illustration. Without the white gouache, it didn't look nearly so metallic. Oh, do remember to mix this with water, folks. Some people didn't understand that. Definitely need to dilute it at least a little bit with water to apply it to the page. But let's go ahead now and move to number 9 in my little tips about drawing. Don't expect progress to occur in a matter of weeks or even months. Drawing, for most people, getting better at drawing takes a very long time. I do occasionally hear from people who claim, you know, oh, I got suddenly better in a couple of weeks. I suppose that's possible. It didn't happen that way for me. I had to keep at it for years and years. I often say it's not a matter of weeks or months or even years, it's a matter of decades. If you want to get really good at drawing, it's something that just requires that level of commitment. I would compare it to learning to play the violin well, or learning to read and write in Chinese. You know, these are tasks that you just have to commit yourself to for a very long time, and it certainly helps if you just love it. You know, and I have always loved drawing. The act of putting pencil to paper is just endlessly fascinating to me, and in that sense, it doesn't feel like, oh, it's time to practice. No, I love it. I just, give me a pencil and paper. I can't think of anything I'd rather do. Let's move on now to the last of my pieces of advice, number 10. If comparing your art to that of other people is bringing you down, then stop doing it. Your work doesn't need to win contests, impress people, or be conventionally beautiful. I wanted to get at least one statement in here of sort of reassurance for people who are not pleased with the way their art looks compared to other people. I want you to sort of open your mind to the possibility that there are different ways of drawing. Not everybody is meant to draw in a photorealistic way. Not everyone needs to draw the way highly admired artists do. You can blaze your own path, find your own way of drawing, and indeed there are styles that almost sort of own what we might be tempted to call ugliness. You know, they are not trying to be pretty, and you should you know, open your mind to all different ways of drawing. Don't limit yourself to these narrow paths of what society has deemed, oh, this is good drawing. I don't subscribe to that. There's so many different ways, and you know, especially if it's weighing you down, this idea of, oh, my drawings don't look like this other person's drawings. Well, just forget making those comparisons. It doesn't need to be that way. And I'm a big believer in the freedom of art, and of there not being, you know, one right way and one wrong way. Definitely, you will never hear me talk about art in those terms. But I guess that brings us to the end of this particular video. Certainly, it's a wide open topic, and I could use your help if you feel like I left anything out. in terms of good advice about drawing, go ahead and put that in the comment section. We'll consider this part 1. And at some point, not next week, not even within the next few weeks, at some point, probably a few months down the line, maybe I can do a part 2, bringing in some extra advice. There's just so many different things to talk about when it comes to getting better at drawing. But for now, let me go ahead and lay down this pencil. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I really hope it helped you out. And I'll be back with another one real soon.